A modest woman was employed by a wealthy to watch his little daughters. When the millionaire witnessed what the new nanny had done to the mother one day, he arrived home early and broke down in tears. As Zoe watched the twins, Harper and Hazel, nestle into their cots, she tried to relax by running her fingers through her wavy brown hair. Zoe was still taken aback by the course life had taken her, even at the age of 28. Although caring for children in a lavish estate in the Boston suburbs was not her original intention, she had discovered an unanticipated enthusiasm for this work. Although she hadn't expected it, she fully welcomed the sense of purpose she gained from her relationship with the twins and the sensation of impacting their lives. With their striking blue eyes and golden locks, the 6-year-old sisters were the epitome of purity. With a weary smile, Zoe adjusted Hazel's blanket. "Miss Zoe, can you tell one more story, please?" Harper pleaded, hope gleaming in her eyes. "Sweetheart, it's already late. Your parents would be upset if they knew you were still awake." Zoe replied gently, resisting the urge to give in to the little girl's request. The children's room was a pastel-colored paradise filled with expensive toys, a stark contrast to the tiny apartment Zoe called home. She moved closer to the window, drawing the silk curtains and looking out at the immaculate garden. The night was strangely quiet, almost oppressively so. So Zoe felt a shiver run down her spine, an inexplicable feeling that something was out of place. As she heard a noise outside, she shook her head, trying to push the thought away. "Girls, did you hear that sound?" Zoe asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Hazel responded sleepily, "Just Mr. Whiskers mewing on the roof again. Daddy said one of these days we'll have to call the firefighters to get him down." Zoe laughed softly, grateful for the children's innocence. She turned toward the door, ready to turn off the lights and let the girls sleep. That is when she heard it, a distinct creak coming from the hallway, as if someone was trying to move quietly over the old wooden floor. Her heart raced, adrenaline flooding her system. She froze, her fingers tightening on the light switch. What was that? "That does not sound like Mr. Whiskers, does it?" Harper asked, sitting up in bed, her eyes wide with fear. Zoe forced a smile, trying to seem calm. "It is probably just the wind, dear. Go back to sleep." Inside, however, her mind was racing. The Collins were not supposed to be home for at least 2 more hours. Who could be in the hallway? Zoe took a deep breath, trying to calm her frayed nerves. She knew she needed to check, but the thought of leaving the girls alone terrified her. Her protective instinct battled with the need to discover the source of the noise. "Stay here, Harper. I am just going to take a quick look outside, okay?" Zoe said, her voice trembling slightly. Harper nodded, pulling the blanket up to her chin. "You will be back soon, right?" Zoe swallowed hard, forcing a reassuring smile. "Of course, dear. I will be back before you can say bear hug." With one last look at the twins, Zoe turned the doorknob, her heart pounding against her ribs. She knew she was about to step into the unknown, but the need to protect the children outweighed her own fear. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door and stepped into the dark hallway, leaving the girls alone in the lit room. So cautiously moved down the second-floor hallway, her steps nearly silent on the Persian rug that stretched over the polished wooden floor. The darkness seemed to swallow her, broken only by the faint moonlight filtering through the tall windows. Her heart was pounding furiously in her chest, and she could feel cold sweat running down her back with every step. The oppressive silence was interrupted by occasional creaks from the old mansion, making Zoe jump. She stopped, straining to catch any unusual sound. "Calm down, Zoe. You need to be strong for the girls, she whispered to herself, trying to steady her breathing. A muffled noise from the end of the hallway caught her attention. Zoe froze, her eyes widening in the dim light. The sound seemed to be coming from the large built-in closet used to store linens and extra towels. With hesitant steps, she approached, reaching out with a trembling hand toward the ornate handle. Her instinct screamed at her to run back to the children's room, but something compelled her to keep going. "What is that noise? Is someone there?" She called softly, her voice barely rising above a whisper. There was no response, just another muffled sound, as if someone were trying to speak through a cloth. With her heart in her throat, Zoe slowly turned the doorknob, feeling each click of the mechanism reverberating through her bones. The door opened with a loud creak, revealing the darkness inside the closet. For a moment, all she could feel was a jolt of shock at what she saw. "Oh my God! Mr. and Mrs. Collins, are you all right? Who put you in this closet? What happened? Tell me!" Zoe exclaimed, her hand flying to cover her mouth in disbelief. There, huddled on the closet floor, were Mr. and Mrs. Collins, their eyes wide with fear and pleading. They were tightly bound with thick ropes, their mouths gagged with tape. Zoe quickly knelt beside them, her hands shaking as she tried to loosen the restraints. Mr. Collins shook his head frantically, begging her with his eyes not to untie them, trying to communicate something through his desperate gaze. "Do not worry. I will get you out of here," Zoe said, her voice trembling as she struggled with the knots. At that moment, a shiver ran down Zoe's spine, a sense of imminent danger wrapping around her, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Slowly, she turned, her body tense with nervousness. Her shadow moved at the edge of her vision, silently sliding down the hallway toward her. Time seemed to freeze as Zoe stared into the darkness, her brain struggling to process what her eyes were seeing. Zoe's heart raced as the shadow took shape, revealing a tall man wearing a black mask that covered his entire face. His eyes, visible through the slits of the mask, gleamed with a threatening intensity. Zoe felt her legs weaken, but survival instinct pushed her into action. Without thinking twice, she turned and ran towards the stairs, her footsteps echoing through the silent hallway. "Help! Help! Please call the police!" Zoe screamed, her voice filled with panic as she tried to alert the neighbors. Though she knew the property was so large that they probably would not hear her, the intruder, surprisingly agile, advanced quickly. His heavy footsteps pounded behind Zoe, growing closer with each passing second. She could feel his presence like a cold and threatening shadow at the back of her neck. Zoe reached the top of the stairs, glancing back quickly. The masked man was reaching out, almost touching her shoulder. In a desperate move, she flung herself forward, skipping the first few steps in an attempt to gain distance. "There is no use running. You have nowhere to go." The intruder's rough voice echoed down the hallway. Panic overtook Zoe as she rushed down the stairs at a frantic pace. Her feet barely touched the steps, and her labored breathing echoed in her ears. Adrenaline surged through her veins, sharpening her senses. She could hear the creaking of the wood under the heavy footsteps of her pursuer, drawing closer with every second. Zoe struggled to stay focused, knowing that a single mistake could be fatal. "Think, Zoe, think. There has to be a way out," she told herself. Just as Zoe was about to reach the landing, her foot slipped on a polished step. The world seemed to slow down in that moment. She felt her body lose balance, her hands desperately grasping at the air, searching for something to hold onto. The railing was out of reach, and Zoe found herself falling. Her body tumbled down the remaining steps, each impact sending waves of pain through her muscles and bones. No, the girls. I need to protect them, Zoe thought, her mind a mixture of pain and desperation. The world around Zoe began to darken as she finally stopped rolling, her body motionless, at the bottom of the stairs. Pain throbbed in every inch of her being, and she fought to stay conscious. Through her blurred vision, Zoe saw the masked figure slowly descending the stairs toward her. The sound of the intruder's footsteps echoed in her ears, blending with the ringing that now filled her mind. "Please, someone help," Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible as the darkness threatened to swallow her. Zoe felt a paralyzing fear, not for what might happen to her, but for the safety of the twins, alone and vulnerable in their room. With a final effort, she tried to move, but her body would not respond. The last thing Zoe saw before losing consciousness was the shadow of the intruder looming over her, growing larger as he approached the girls. God, protect the girls, she prayed silently, and it was the last thought she had before the darkness consumed her completely. Minutes later, consciousness slowly returned to Zoe, like a fog lifting. Her eyes opened to the oppressive darkness of the basement, and she tried to move, only to discover that her arms and legs were tightly bound to a wooden chair. The throbbing pain in her head made her groan softly as memories of the earlier events flooded her mind in chaotic flashes. The cold of the basement seeped into her bones, and the smell of mold and dampness filled her nostrils. Zoe blinked rapidly, trying to adjust her vision to the dim light as the hazy outlines of stacked boxes and old furniture gradually took shape around her. The twins? The Collins? Oh God, what might have happened to them while I was unconscious? Zoe murmured to herself, her heart racing with worry, fighting against the growing panic. Zoe tested the restraints on her wrists and ankles. The ropes were thick and tight, digging into her skin with every movement. She gritted her teeth, determined not to give in to despair. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for something, anything, she could use to free herself. A rusty old saw hanging on the opposite wall caught her attention. So close, yet impossibly far. "There has to be a way out of here," she whispered, her mind racing through possible escape scenarios. The eerie silence of the basement was broken by a sharp creak from the house above. Zoe froze, her muscles tense with apprehension. Footsteps. Someone was moving on the lower floor, and from the sound of it, they were getting closer to the basement door. Each step echoed like thunder in her ears, making her heart beat even faster. She swallowed hard, trying to control her labored breathing. "Stay calm, Zoe. You need to stay alert to find a way out," she thought, forcing herself to breathe more slowly. The footsteps suddenly stopped, followed by the metallic sound of a key turning in the lock. Zoe felt the blood run cold in her veins. Her eyes locked on the basement door in front of her, waiting for it to open at any moment, and for the masked man to come in and hurt her. The seconds dragged on like hours, each moment of anticipation more agonizing than the last. She could hear her own heart pounding against her ribs, so loud she was sure the intruder could hear it too. If it's the intruder from the house, I will not let him intimidate me. I need to be strong for the children. If he's busy with me, they will be safe. I have to make it as difficult as possible for him, so they have time to escape or get help. I will not go down easily. I will put up a fight so the girls can stay safe," Zoe promised herself, gathering all the courage she could. With a soft click, the doorknob began to turn. Zoe held her breath, her wide eyes fixed on the door as it slowly creaked open on its rusty hinges. A sliver of light spread down the basement stairs, growing as the door opened wider. The dark silhouette of a figure began to form against the light, and Zoe felt her entire body tremble with fear and anticipation. Whoever it was, they were about to confront her. "Who is there? What do you want?" Zoe shouted, her voice shaking but determined not to show weakness. Upstairs, Hazel and Harper woke up, startled by the sound of a muffled scream. The twins exchanged nervous glances in the dim light of their room, their wide eyes reflecting the fear they felt. Harper, the braver of the two, was the first to get out of bed, her bare feet making almost no sound on the plush carpet. "Hazel, did you hear that? It sounded like Miss Zoe. We need to check if she's all right," Harper whispered, reaching out her hand to her sister. Hazel hesitated for a moment, but then took her sister's hand, allowing herself to be pulled out of bed. The two, in their matching unicorn pajamas, quietly made their way to the bedroom door. Harper carefully turned the doorknob, opening a crack to peek into the dark hallway. Seeing no one, she signaled to Hazel, and they both stepped into the hallway. "What if it's a monster? Maybe we should go back to bed," Hazel asked, her voice trembling. Harper squeezed her sister's hand, trying to give her courage. "Don't be silly. Monsters aren't real. Besides, Miss Zoe might need our help." The twins tiptoed down the stairs, their hearts pounding in their chests. They couldn't hear their parents, who were once again tied up in the closet, unable to warn their daughters. The girls reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped, listening intently. A muffled sound came from the direction of the kitchen. "Come on, it must be Miss Zoe. Maybe she's making hot chocolate for us," Harper whispered, pulling Hazel toward the kitchen. Hazel followed reluctantly, clinging to her sister's arm. "But what if it's not her? What if it's someone bad? That noise we heard was really strange," Hazel said. The girls entered the dark kitchen, their eyes slowly adjusting to the lack of light. The full moon cast a silvery glow through the window above the sink, partially illuminating the room. Harper felt along the wall for the light switch, but froze when she heard a creak coming from the basement door. "Hazel, look, there's someone there," Harper whispered, pointing toward the basement entrance. The twins stood frozen as a shadowy figure slowly emerged from the darkness of the basement. The silhouette was tall and menacing. Definitely not Miss Zoe. The girls' hearts raced, and they clung to each other, trying not to make a sound. Harper squeezed Hazel's hand, their fingers trembling with fear. With her heart pounding frantically, she pulled her sister toward the back door of the kitchen. Their bare feet made barely any noise on the cold floor as they moved cautiously, their eyes locked on the dark figure emerging from the basement. The twins crouched as they made their way around the kitchen island, using it as a shield while they inched closer to the exit. Harper handled the doorknob with care, turning it slowly so it wouldn't make a sound. "Slowly," Hazel whispered, her voice barely audible. "We can't let him hear us." The door creaked open slightly, causing the girls to freeze for a moment. The night breeze flowed in through the gap, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and the distant sound of crickets. Harper glanced back one last time, making sure the intruder was still distracted, before pulling Hazel out into the backyard. The full moon bathed the well-kept lawn in a silvery light, casting long and unsettling shadows. "Harper, I'm scared. Where is Miss Zoe?" Hazel whimpered, clinging to her sister's arm. The twins moved across the yard, their feet sinking into the dew-covered grass. They zigzagged, using the shadows cast by ornamental shrubs and fruit trees for cover. Harper's heart pounded so loudly, she was sure it could be heard from miles away. Her eyes scanned the yard, desperately searching for a safe place to hide or a way to escape. "We have to get to Mrs. Patel's house," Harper decided, remembering the kind neighbor who always greeted them. "She will help us." As they neared the fence that separated their yard from the neighbors, a sudden movement caught Harper's attention. She stopped abruptly, pulling Hazel behind a large hydrangea bush. The large flowers provided perfect cover, and the girls crouched down, trying to control their ragged breathing. Harper peeked through the leaves, her eyes wide with fear as she saw the kitchen door swing fully open. "He's coming, Hazel. Don't move," Harper whispered, her voice trembling. The intruder stepped into the garden, his tall and menacing silhouette outlined against the kitchen light. He seemed to be looking in all directions, as if aware that the girls had escaped. Harper held her breath, silently praying they wouldn't be discovered. At that tense moment, something unexpected happened. A sudden fierce spark pierced the night air, causing the twins to jump in fright. Mrs. Patel's dog was in the neighboring yard, barking furiously in their direction. Harper's heart sank as she saw the intruder turn sharply toward the barking, his eyes sweeping the garden with renewed intensity. "Oh no, he's going to find us," Hazel whimpered softly, burying her face into Harper's shoulder. Harper grabbed Hazel's hand and, without hesitating, pulled her down to the ground, signaling for them to crawl toward the treehouse. The twins crawled through the damp grass, their unicorn pajamas getting covered in mud as they tried to escape. Harper's heart was pounding so hard that she was certain the intruder could hear it. Reaching the base of the large oak tree, Harper stood up and pushed her sister toward the rope ladder. "Climb fast, Hazel. Don't look back. Just climb," Harper whispered urgently. The girls climbed the ladder as quietly as possible, their small hands gripping the wooden rungs. Harper could hear Hazel's heavy breathing ahead of her, mixed with the distant barking of the neighbor's dog. Finally, they reached the platform of the treehouse, crawling inside the small wooden structure their father had built last summer. "Harper, I'm scared. Where is Miss Zoe? And what about Mom and Dad? Do you think they've come home from work? If they have, the bad man might catch them," Hazel whimpered, hugging her knees to her chest. Harper put a finger to her lips, signaling Hazel to stay quiet. She crawled over to the window of the treehouse, cautiously peeking out into the yard. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw the shadowy figure of the intruder emerging from the kitchen door, his head turning from side to side, clearly searching for them. "He's down there. We have to be very quiet," Harper whispered, her voice barely audible. The twins watched, frozen with fear, as the intruder methodically searched the yard. He looked behind bushes, checked inside the tool shed, and even inspected the old tire swing. With each step he took toward the tree, Harper's heart pounded harder. She could feel Hazel trembling beside her and squeezed her sister's hand, trying to offer some comfort. "What if he finds us here? What are we going to do?" Hazel asked, her eyes wide with fear. Harper swallowed hard, her mind racing for an answer. "Don't worry, he won't find us. Dad always says we're his little silent ninjas. Remember?" The intruder was now directly beneath the treehouse, his head tilted back, scanning the branches above. The twins held their breath, shrinking further into the darkest corner of the small structure. Harper could see the gleam of the man's eyes through his mask, sweeping over every inch of the tree. For one terrible moment, she was certain he had spotted them. "Where are you? You little pests? Come out, come out." wherever you are." The intruder's rough voice echoed through the yard. At that moment, Hazel shifted slightly, her elbow bumping into an old plastic toy forgotten in the corner of the treehouse. The toy slowly slid toward the edge of the platform. Harper watched in horror, as if in slow motion, the toy falling from the treehouse, likely landing right at the intruder's feet. In the silence of the night, the sound of the plastic hitting the grass seemed deafening. "Oh no, now he's going to find us for sure," Harper thought, her heart nearly stopping. The sound of the toy hitting the ground echoed through the yard, and the girls heard the intruder's footsteps quickly approaching the treehouse. Thinking fast, Harper grabbed Hazel's hand and pulled her toward a large toy chest in the corner of the platform. Moving frantically, she opened the lid and pushed her sister inside. "Quick, Hazel! Get in and stay quiet," Harper whispered urgently. As they squeezed into the chest, the girls had barely closed the lid when they heard the creak of the treehouse ladder. The intruder was climbing up. Inside the dark, cramped chest, the twins clung to each other, trying to control their ragged breathing. The smell of old wood and dusty toys filled the air around them. Harper could feel Hazel's heart pounding furiously against hers. "Please, dear God, protect us. Do not let this man find us," Harper prayed silently, squeezing her sister's hand. The heavy footsteps of the intruder echoed on the wooden platform of the treehouse. The twins listened as he moved around, rummaging through things, searching for them. The sound was so close, they were certain he could hear their breathing. Harper squeezed her eyes shut, thinking that if she couldn't see the danger, maybe it wouldn't be able to see them either. "Where are you, you little pests?" The intruder's rough voice reached the girls' ears, muffled but terrifying. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded away. The girls heard the intruder descending the treehouse ladder, muttering in frustration. Even so, they didn't dare move or make a sound. They remained still and silent for several minutes until they were sure the danger had passed. "Harper, I think he's gone. Can we get out now?" Hazel whispered, her voice trembling. Carefully, Harper cracked open the lid of the chest, peeking outside. The yard was quiet and appeared empty. She motioned to Hazel, and both of them slowly climbed out of the chest, their legs numb from staying in the same position for so long. The twins approached the edge of the treehouse, cautiously observing the yard and the house. "Look, Harper, he's up there now." Hazel pointed to a light that had just turned on in their parents' bedroom. In the master bedroom, the intruder was frantically rifling through drawers and closets, tossing clothes and objects onto the floor. His movements were quick and determined, as if he knew exactly what he was looking for. He paused for a moment, running a hand over his face in frustration, before his eyes locked onto a large painting on the opposite wall. "It must be here," the man muttered to himself as he approached the painting. With a sharp tug, he pulled the painting off the wall, revealing a small safe built into the wall. A crooked smile spread across his lips as he ran his fingers over the metal surface of the safe. It was clear that he had found what he was searching for. "Bingo! Now I just need to figure out the combination," he said, with satisfaction in the dark, damp basement. Zoe was struggling against the ropes that bound her to the chair. Her wrists were raw from the constant friction, but she couldn't afford to stop. Every second was precious, and her worry for the twins consumed her as she worked on loosening the restraints. Her mind drifted back to the moment when she had heard footsteps approaching the basement door just minutes before. It was pure luck that whoever was trying to come down here gave up, so thought, a shiver running down her spine. But what if he found the girls? With one final, desperate tug, Zoe felt the ropes loosen. Now I need to find the twins and get them out of here, Zoe murmured to herself, determination shining in her eyes. Zoe moved silently through the dark hallway, her aching body protesting with every step. She had managed to free herself from the basement using a broken piece of glass she found on the floor, but the process had left her wrists raw and bleeding. Her heart pounded frantically as she approached Mr. Collins's office, knowing that every second counted. The children were still in danger, and she had to act fast. "Hang in there, girls. I will get you out of this, no matter what it takes," Zoe whispered to herself. When she reached the office door, Zoe pressed her ear against the wood, listening carefully for any sign of the intruder. Satisfied with the silence, she slowly turned the doorknob, silently thanking her luck when the door opened without a creak. The office was bathed in silver moonlight, streaming through the window, revealing shelves lined with books and an imposing mahogany desk. So quickly moved to the desk, her eyes scanning frantically for the phone. Come on. I need to call the police before it's too late," she whispered, rummaging through the papers on the desk. Finally, her fingers found the phone beside a stack of documents. With trembling hands, Zoe picked up the receiver and dialed the police, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear the dial tone. Every second felt like an eternity as she waited for someone to answer, her eyes constantly darting back to the door, fearing the intruder might appear at any moment. However, on the other side of the house, the intruder dragged Mr. and Mrs. Collins down the hallway, their hands still tightly bound behind their backs. The moonlight streaming through the windows cast distorted shadows on the walls, making the scene even more sinister. The masked man shoved the couple against the built-in cabinets, the dull thud echoing through the silent hallway. His eyes, visible through the slits of the mask, glowed with a mixture of determination and anger. "Now you two are going to tell me the code to that safe, and do not try any tricks or things are going to get real ugly around here," the intruder growled, his voice low and threatening, before ripping the tape off the mouths of his captives. Mr. Collins, despite the obvious fear in his eyes, remained firm. "We don't know what you're talking about." "What's safe?" The intruder laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Do not play smart with me. I know about the safe behind the painting. What's in there that's worth hiding?" Mrs. Collins sobbed quietly, trying to keep herself composed. "Please, we have young daughters. Do not hurt our girls." The masked man leaned in closer, his face inches from hers. "Then you better start talking. Where are the kids, and what's the damn code?" At that moment, a subtle noise from the office caught everyone's attention. The intruder spun around quickly, his eyes narrowing with suspicion that someone might be trying to call the police. Without hesitation, he pulled a pair of pliers from his pocket and headed toward the foam panel in the hallway. Meanwhile, in the office, Zoe anxiously waited for someone to pick up the emergency call. After what felt like hours, the call was answered. "Police, what is your emergency?" The calm voice of the operator finally came through on the other end. Zoe took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice low and steady. "Please, we need help. There's an intruder in the house. He has tied up the owners and is looking for the children. I'm at the Collins residence on." At that moment, Zoe heard a noise coming from the hallway. Her blood ran cold, and she quickly ducked behind the desk, still clutching the phone tightly. The sound of heavy footsteps grew closer, and Zoe could feel the panic rising in her chest. She knew she needed to finish the call quickly, but the fear of being discovered paralyzed her. "Mom, are you still there? What's the full address?" The operator's voice sounded distant in her ears. Zoe gathered all her courage and whispered urgently into the phone. "It's on Maple Street, number." But before she could finish, the call abruptly dropped, leaving only the sound of a dead dial tone. "No, no, no. They don't know where we are." Zoe thought desperately. On the other side of the house, with quick and precise movements, the intruder cut all the telephone wires, effectively isolating the house from the outside world before Zoe could give the house number to the police. "It looks like we have a little rat hiding around here. This is going to be interesting. I think I need to go find it," the intruder muttered, a menacing tone in his voice, after cutting the phone line. "Please do not hurt anyone. The code is 24, 18, and 42. Mrs. Collins said. The intruder turned to her. "See? That wasn't so hard, was it? Now let's have a little look at what you're hiding in there." As he turned back to head toward the master bedroom, another sound came from the office. The intruder paused, tilting his head slightly. "Looks like our little rat is getting careless. I think it's time to welcome our surprise guest." "No, please. Leave us alone. Do not hurt my daughters or the nanny. None of them have anything to do with this." "What did you do to the nanny, anyway?" Mr. Collins asked, his voice trembling with concern. The intruder laughed again, the sound sending chills down the Collins spines. "Oh, do not worry about her. I'm sure she's having a nice nap down in the basement. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got a safe to crack and a rat to catch." Meanwhile, in the office, Zoe heard footsteps heading toward the attic and followed, her heart in her throat. The sound of feet on the floorboards above suggested more than one person, so her eyes frantically scanned the dimly lit attic space, searching for any sign of the twins. "Hazel? Harper? Are you here? It's me, Zoe. Everything's going to be okay now," Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible. A slight movement behind a pile of old boxes caught her attention. Zoe approached cautiously, and her heart leaped when she saw two pairs of frightened eyes staring back at her. The twins were huddled in a corner, holding each other tightly, their faces pale with fear. Zoe knelt in front of them, tears of relief welling in her eyes. "Oh, thank God. Are you two all right?" Zoe asked, checking the girls for any signs of injury. Harper, always the braver one, was the first to speak. "Zoe, we thought the bad man had hurt you. We were so scared. We ran out of the treehouse and hid in here to help you." Zoe hugged the twins tightly, feeling their small bodies tremble against hers. She knew they didn't have much time, but she allowed herself this brief moment of comfort. The danger was still very real, and Zoe could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She needed to get the girls out of there, and quickly. "Listen, girls, we need to leave. I'm going to get you out of this house, but I need you to be very brave and very quiet. Can you do that for me?" Zoe said, keeping her voice low but firm. Hazel, with tears in her eyes, Zoe nodded silently. "How are we going to get out?" "So, the bad man is downstairs," Hazel said. Zoe looked around the attic, her mind racing to find a way out. Her eyes landed on a small window in the roof, partially covered by an old tarp. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. She stood up, gently pulling the twins along with her. "We are going to use that window. We can climb down onto the roof and jump to the nearest tree. You've done that when playing before, right?" Zoe explained, pointing to the window. The girls nodded, a flicker of excitement mixed with fear in their eyes. Zoe began moving some boxes to clear a path to the window, trying to be as quiet as possible. Every noise seemed deafening in the tense silence of the attic. She could feel the sweat running down her back, not just from the physical effort, but from the constant tension. "Almost there. Just a little more, and we'll be out," Zoe whispered, stretching to reach the window latch. That's when they heard it. A distinct creak coming from the attic stairs, slow, heavy footsteps climbing step by step. Zoe froze, her blood running cold. The twins clung to her legs, their small bodies shaking with fear. The sound grew closer with every step, each one echoing like a death sentence. "He's coming. What are we going to do now?" Harper whispered, terror clear in her voice. Zoe acted quickly, her mind racing to find a solution. With a swift gesture, she grabbed Harper and Hazel by the hand and led them to the small attic window. The dusty glass offered a narrow view of the roof and the garden below. Zoe knew it was dangerous, but they had no other choice. With quick, precise movements, she unlocked the window and pushed it open, feeling the cool night air against her face. "Girls, we need to be very brave right now. We are going to climb down the roof to the garage. Can you do that for me?" Zoe whispered, looking into the twins' eyes. Zoe helped Harper out first, then Hazel, guiding them carefully onto the slanted roof. Their bare feet found little grip on the slippery tiles, but fear drove them forward. Zoe followed last, casting nervous glances at the attic stairs every few seconds. The sound of footsteps had stopped, but she knew it was only a matter of time before the intruder caught up to them. "We're almost there, girls, just a little more," Zoe whispered, her voice barely audible as they reached the edge of the roof. Zoe assessed the distance to the ground. It was a considerable drop, but there was a large tree branch that could serve as an improvised support. Carefully, she helped the twins climb down the tree, their small hands gripping tightly to the wooden branches. Once they were all safely on the ground, Zoe quickly led them to the garage, their hearts racing. "The garage is locked. How are we going to get in?" Harper asked, pulling on the handle in vain. Zoe looked around frantically, searching for a solution. Her eyes landed on a small side window, just big enough for the girls to fit through. In one swift motion, she broke the glass with her elbow, ignoring the sharp pain and the blood that started to drip down her arm. She helped the twins through the window and then squeezed herself through the opening, landing on the concrete floor of the garage. "Quick, get in the car. We're getting out of here," Zoe instructed, rushing to the Collins family set-in. With trembling hands, Zoe searched for the keys she knew were hidden under the sun visor. Finding them, she slid them into the ignition with a sigh of relief. The twins settled into the back seat, their heavy breathing filling the intense silence. Zoe turned the key, but her relief was short-lived. The engine sputtered, but the car didn't move. "No, no, no. Please work," Zoe muttered, trying again. Getting out of the car, Zoe ran to check what was wrong. Her heart sank when she saw all 4 tires completely slashed. The intruder had thought of everything. In that moment of despair, a pair of headlights suddenly illuminated the garage entrance, momentarily blinding them. Zoe froze, instinctively positioning herself to shield the children. "Who is it? Is it the Batman?" Harper asked, her voice shaking with fear. Zoe's heart leaped when she looked out the window and recognized the distinctive colors of a police car. The headlights that had frightened her were actually from the police vehicle. The siren was off, but the lights flashed silently, casting blue and red glows across the night. Two officers stepped out of the car, their hands cautiously resting on their weapons. Zoe felt a wave of relief wash over her, but she knew the danger wasn't over yet. "Police, is anyone there?" One of the officers called out, his firm and authoritative voice echoing through the garage. "Here, please help us. There's an intruder in the house." Zoe shouted, waving frantically. The following events unfolded in a whirlwind of action. Zoe hugged the twins protectively, watching the scene with a mix of fear and hope. "Stay here, girls. Everything is going to be fine now," Zoe instructed, her voice trembling slightly. The intruder was quick, leaping over bushes and weaving through trees in the backyard, but the officers were right behind him, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. One of the officers managed to get close enough to grab the fugitive's arm. There was a brief struggle, with the intruder thrashing wildly, but the officer's training prevailed. With a swift move, he brought the man to the ground and handcuffed him. "You're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent," the officer declared, as the first officer escorted the intruder back to the front of the house. The second officer approached Zoe and the children. His face showed a mix of concern and relief. "Are you all right? Is anyone hurt?" Zoe shook her head, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "We're fine, thank God. But the girls' parents, they're still inside." The officer nodded, immediately heading into the house to check. Minutes later, which felt like an eternity, he returned with Mr. and Mrs. Collins, both visibly shaken but unharmed. The twins ran into their parents' arms, sobbing with relief and joy. "Mommy, Daddy," the girls cried out in unison, clinging to their parents with all their strength. As the family reunited, the intruder was placed in the police car. His mask had been removed, revealing a face that Mr. Collins recognized. With a sigh of surprise, it was Jack, a former employee who had been fired months earlier for misconduct. "Jack, why?" Mr. Collins asked, his voice a mix of shock and disappointment. The former employee shot a look of pure hatred at his old boss. "You ruined my life when you fired me. I just wanted what was mine by right," he spat. Zoe watched the scene unfold, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Relief that it was all over, pride for having protected the children, and deep gratitude for the timely arrival of the police. She approached the Collins family, who were now huddled in a tight embrace. Mrs. Collins, still trembling from the traumatic experience, turned to Zoe with tear-filled eyes. She held the nanny's hands between her own, squeezing them with a blend of gratitude and emotion. The twins, Harper and Hazel, clung to their mother's legs, their small faces still marked by fear, but now also by relief. "Zoe, I don't even know where to begin," Mrs. Collins said, her voice choked with emotion. "What you did for our family tonight, there aren't enough words to express our gratitude. You risked your own life to protect our girls, showing a courage and dedication that goes far beyond your duties as a nanny." Mrs. Collins paused, taking a deep breath to hold back the tears threatening to fall. So could feel the woman's hands trembling and the weight of her words. The flashing lights of the police cars cast dancing shadows over the group, creating a surreal backdrop for this moment of intense emotion. "When we hired you, we knew you were special, but we could never have imagined just how special you really are," Mrs. Collins continued, her voice gaining strength. "You're not just a nanny, Zoe. You're a guardian angel, a hero. What you did tonight, the way you kept our daughters safe, how you faced danger, it shows the kind of person you are." The twins, listening to their mother's words, looked at Zoe with a mix of admiration and love. Harper, the more talkative of the two, whispered, "You're our superhero, Zoe." Mrs. Collins smiled through her tears at her daughter's comment. "And she's right. Zoe, you are a superhero, not just for the girls, but for all of us. That's why we want you to know that from now on, you're not just our nanny. You're part of our family." Zoe felt a lump form in her throat, deeply moved by Mrs. Collins's words. She didn't know what to say, feeling both honored and humbled by such praise. The adrenaline of the night was beginning to wear off, leaving her exhausted but profoundly grateful that everyone was safe. "You deserve a promotion, Zoe," Mrs. Collins continued, a genuine smile lighting up her tired face. "Not just a raise, but a position with more responsibility within our family and our business. You've proven you can handle anything, and we want you to grow with us." Mr. Collins, who had been silently observing the scene, stepped forward. He placed a comforting hand on his wife's shoulder and looked directly at Zoe, his eyes reflecting a deep sense of gratitude and respect. "Zoe," he began, his deep voice filled with emotion, "what my wife said only scratches the surface of how much we want to express. Your courage, your quick thinking, your devotion to our daughters. All of this has shown us that you are far more than we ever could have hoped for in a nanny." Mr. Collins paused, glancing briefly at his daughters, who were now smiling shyly at Zoe. "You not only saved our girls' lives, but you also protected our family in a way that we will never be able to repay. Your swift action, your intelligence in handling such a dangerous situation, it demonstrates exceptional character." He took a deep breath as if gathering his thoughts. "So in addition to the promotion my wife mentioned, we want to offer you a stake in our business. We want you to be part of not only our family, but also our future. Your insight and bravery are qualities we value greatly, and we believe you have so much more to contribute to our company." Zoe was stunned. She looked from Mr. Collins to Mrs. Collins, her eyes wide with surprise. I don't know what to say," she stammered, feeling overwhelmed by the generosity and trust they were placing in her. Mr. Collins smiled gently. "You do not need to say anything right now, Zoe. We know that tonight has been traumatic for all of us, but we want you to know how much we value you and how much we trust in your abilities. You are not just an employee to us. You are family." The twins, sensing the emotion of the moment, ran over to hug Zoe. Harper and Hazel wrapped their little arms around Zoe's waist, their faces pressed against her in a tight embrace. "Please say you'll stay with us forever, Zoe," Hazel pleaded, her voice muffled against Zoe's shirt. Zoe felt the tears finally escape, rolling silently down her cheeks as she hugged the girls back. She looked up at Mr. and Mrs. Collins, who watched the scene with emotional smiles. "Thank you," Zoe finally managed to say, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me, for giving me this opportunity. I love these girls like they are my own sisters, and I am honored to be part of your family." Mr. and Mrs. Collins joined the embrace, wrapping their arms around Zoe and the twins in a circle of love and gratitude. In that moment, under the flashing lights of the police cars and the starry sky, a new family was formed, united by bonds forged through adversity and strengthened by love and mutual trust. 6 months after that fateful night, Jack remained in prison, and the Collins residence exuded a completely different atmosphere. The once quiet garden now echoed with the joyful laughter of Hazel and Harper, who played carefree on the lush green grass. The house, once a scene of terror, had transformed into a true home, filled with love and security. So now not just a nanny, but an integral part of the Collins family, watched the girls from the porch, a serene smile on her face. Her promotion came with a generous raise, and more importantly, a deep sense of belonging. The scars on her wrists, physical reminders of that night, had faded, just like the nightmares that once haunted her. Mr. and Mrs. Collins emerged from the house, carrying a tray of fresh lemonade. The couple had undergone a remarkable transformation. The trauma of the invasion had brought them closer in ways they had never imagined. Now, they prioritized family time, working fewer hours and dedicating themselves to creating precious memories with their daughters. "So, dear, come join us," Mrs. Collins called out, her radiant smile reflecting the peace she had finally found. The twins ran toward the porch, their faces flushed with excitement. Harper, always the more talkative, began excitedly recounting her adventures in the garden, while Hazel, still a little shy, cuddled into Zoe's lap. It was the perfect picture of domestic happiness. Mr. Collins raised his glass in an impromptu toast. "To our family, including you, Zoe. We could not be more grateful to have you in our lives," he said, his voice filled with emotion. That fateful night had left its marks, but it had also brought positive changes. The house's security had been upgraded with a state-of-the-art alarm system, and the local community had grown closer, with neighbors looking out for one another. The safe, once an object of greed, now held not only valuables but also precious family memories. Jack, the ex-worker who had terrorized everyone, was in prison awaiting his sentence. Many were astonished by the Collins family's charitable decision to forego the maximum sentence because they thought rehabilitation would be possible. The twins were getting over their nightmares, but they were making good progress. Family therapy sessions assisted them in processing the trauma, and they felt even more secure because of Zoe's unwavering love. Zoe stayed on the porch with the Collins family, enjoying each other's company as the sun sank, illuminating the sky in pink and orange hues. A beautiful future, where love and faith had overcome fear and adversity, was promised in the air. There was only a profound sense of thankfulness and serenity when Zoe put the girls to bed that evening. There was no hesitancy or anxiety. Knowing that she was right at home with her family, she smiled as she softly shut the bedroom door.